Hello, I'm Dapper Dan Gavosden, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, including the annuals, which definitely count.
And I'm Mischievous Mark Ginocchio, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man. But Dan, my friend, my dear co-host and compatriot, the annuals don't count.
Well, welcome to the Amazing Spider Talk, the show where two fans and collectors uncover the strange, sometimes fun, sometimes annual, and always fascinating history of the Spider-Man comic universe. Thanks for joining us for this review episode of The Amazing Spider Talk. Sorry, my disappointment got me a little bit carried away there.
I was gonna say you were selling it, man. Like I was starting to feel bad. I'm like, did I go too
Yeah,
far?
that was it.
Did I finally break
He broke
them?
me. He
I
broke
finally
me.
broke
Yeah,
them.
yeah. So, Mark,
Well, now that
if people want to follow along and witness my journey to become a broken man, how would they do so?
Yeah, well, from start to finish, if you want to swing along with us on our journey through Spidey's past, present, and future and Dan's brokenness, subscribe to Amazing Spider Talk on your favorite podcast app. Every other week, we put out a mainline episode of our flagship show, and sprinkled in between, we review new comics as well as interview some of the greatest Spider-Man creators of yesterday and today. This is the perfect time to start listening. Well, Dan, on today's episode, we are going to be talking about Volume 5, number 90. I should probably say what the book is. Let me start over. Well, Dad, today on the show, you and I are going to be discussing Amazing Spider-Man, Volume 5, number 90, entitled Beyond, Chapter 16. This issue was written by Patrick Gleason, with pencils from Mark Bagley, inks by Andrew Hennessy, John Dell, Andy Owens, Wayne Faucher, and Victor Olazaba. It's a lot of inkers, Dan. Colors by Bryan Balenza, Dijjo Lima, and Andrew Crossley. A cover by Arthur Adams and Alejandro Sanchez Rodriguez. And letters by VC's Joe Caramagna. It's always a bonus the more artists' names are listed, because then Mark gets to mangle them. This issue was first released on February 23rd, 2022. Dan, why don't you tell us what happened in this issue?
Well, what happened was every couple pages they changed inkers. It's not a great sign when there's about as many artists as there are pages. But you know what? That doesn't mean it's a bad issue. Let's get into what happens in the issue. My summary for Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5, number 90. Ben ignores Maxine's pleas for him to return to fight Queen Goblin and whisks Janine away to the Queensboro Bridge. Maxine threatens to make them fugitives again as Ben confesses to Janine that his memories aren't quite what they used to be. She directs him to Beyond's covert supervillain development site in Staten Island, of course, to put an end to Beyond's conspiracies. She asks that he leave her at the McCarthy Medical Facility, where Peter's staying. Meanwhile,
Right.
Peter and the Queen Goblin battle it out, with her constantly getting the upper hand and destroying New York in the process. They end up at the Queensboro Bridge, where Peter forces her out over the East River. But she gets the upper hand again and inflicts her goblin's gaze on Peter. It sends him spiraling into a depression as he sinks into the riverbed below. It's there that the floating heads of guilt return, but Peter hears the voice of Ben, reminding him of their brotherhood. Ben asks him to get up and reminds Peter that they can both be the Amazing Spider-Man. His words revitalize Peter, and he leaps triumphantly from the East River and decks the Queen Goblin. Peter is then rescued by the Coast Guard as she flies away. Peter and MJ then deduce that Ben is headed towards Staten Island, because why not? And Peter decides to go help him, knowing that together they equal one whole Spider-Man, half memory, half weakness, all Spider-Man. Ben arrives at the facility.
All wonderful.
Yes, that's it. Ben arrives at the facility and encounters Peter. They both decide to team up and take down Beyond with one well-timed bro.
Brothers don't shake hands, Dan. brothers got a hug.
All right.
Anyway.
Perfect. I wish I could give you a hug, Mark, but instead we're going to talk about Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5, number 90. I guess if there was a warm hug in the form of a comic, maybe this would be it.
Indeed, indeed. Well, speaking of one half of the Brotherhood here, let's talk a little bit about Ben Reilly, because just some of the characterization here stood out to me from Gleason here. I mean, we talked so much again about last time around his Peter, but he writes just as good as Ben, which maybe makes sense since, you know, they are clones. But no, I mean, with that said, like, Marvel's been teasing for some time now that there is, you know, that Peter and Ben are going to come to blows, and, you know, after the way the last few issues have depicted Ben as kind of being this responsibility-less version of Spider-Man, callous almost, in terms of his responsibility. I kind of was like kind of dreading seeing the heel turn for Ben, and what they were setting up. So I was pleasantly surprised when Ben kind of comes out in this issue and he's like, look, I know something's wrong with me. It's all Beyond's fault. I'm not whole. Like, there's something missing inside me, and I got to figure it out. So like, to me, it puts Ben in a far more interesting place. So like, if this turn is not a bait and switch and Peter and Ben do end up facing off, I feel like we're now set up in a more interesting trajectory to get there, versus Ben just being kind of reverting to almost his villainous self again that we saw during like Dead No More. Does that make sense, Dan?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I love the explicit nature that, like, yes, he wants to bring down Beyond, but first his goal really is to restore himself and make himself whole again. And Janine says, like, they're not going to take everything from us, right? Like, you need to get your memories back. Whether that happens or not, you know, will yet to be seen. But I like that. That's like a very clear threshold. Like, that's what he's going for. And you're right. It's way more interesting than just Ben bad, Peter good.
Yeah, and the stuff with Janine was really good here too. I mean, Janine, you know, for better or worse, has kind of been written oddly in this run. You know, like. She's kind of the tell don't show of character here, in terms of like, well, no, she's important to Ben, so we have to keep reinforcing that. But like, you never really saw a lot of like what made them special together. And you know, between like the ride or die comment and stuff, like I don't know, like I just felt the warmth there between the two characters. It goes back to what you were saying in the last episode, Dan. Like, these are just characters that want to be around each other, that like each other, that, you know, want to engage with each other, which is like, you know, shouldn't be that foreign of a concept in a Spider-Man comic, but here we are. We're going to praise it for just writing characters who like each other. But it worked for me for Janine. Like, I felt this was the strongest she's been since Beyond began.
I like her motivations too. You know, like it's beyond threatening to make them fugitives again, and she doesn't want to go back to that lifestyle. And I thought that was a really strong moment for her as well. I'm not really clear why Beyond would have built an airplane mode into the Spider-Man costume, but fair enough. You know.
I mean, Beyond just keeps putting in like all of these little like features and gadgets that backfire. It's almost like, you know, Jack's smirking plot hole. I don't know. Like, it just happens. It just, you know, happens every couple of issues. I don't know. Comics, people.
Speaking of Ben, what did you think of the final moment where he like looks down at the Spider-Man mask and it seems to be kind of like evaporating into like an image of his face? Like, to me, it seemed kind of like he's not only forgetting like the mantra of Spider-Man, he's forgetting Spider-Man altogether, because Peter shows up the next second and he's like, "Who are you?" And then Peter's like, "Oh, I'm Peter." And he's like, "Oh yeah, Peter." You know, is that what you took away from that moment? Because it's visually weird. Like, it's like the mask's eyes are dissolving or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I got like to that exact place, but like along those lines. I mean, we've been obviously getting this imagery of like faces disappearing since the very beginning of this arc. And as we've established, it's because of Ben's memories disintegrating essentially. So it was effective to me. I mean, yeah, I think this is just more of the effect of just Ben kind of falling apart and disappearing within himself, and losing that part of himself. And going back to what we were saying at the very, very beginning of this segment, probably is where this is all ultimately leading in terms of Ben vis-a-vis Peter, but still more interesting than just Ben being a jerk.
Yeah.
Obviously sympathetic if he's just losing who he is. It's quite tragic. It's setting up for some tragedy, but in the interim, I really appreciated that Ben is at his core trying to make right and trying to do right. I just want to see that. I by hook or by crook, they have made me care about Ben Reilly again, and I want to see that through.
They got you, Mark.
They got me.
We started this review joking about the 5 inkers on this book. What do we think of Bagley's art? I mean, we got 2 inkers on the last issue. To me, the 5 inkers here might give a little more credence to your idea that we talked about last episode, that Bagley might be in a fill-in position here. 5 inkers to me is not your like first plan when you're making a comic book.
No, there's clearly some personnel issues going on at Marvel right now in terms of their art staff, and that's unfortunate. I think just in terms of like putting aside the 900 inkers, which that's kind of like, other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln? But like talking specifically about Bagley again. I mean, I almost wish I could just. Can we cut and paste our audio from 89, because I think it applies here. I mean, like, there is clearly signs of some sloppiness, or maybe even inconsistency of inking. You found some really, really sloppy coloring issues, which obviously have nothing to do with Mark Bagley or his inkers. But point being, this is clearly a time crunch going into effect here. But then there were also some really good splash pages. There was a great double page splash with like SpiderMan and Queen Goblin kind of fighting above the city that I really enjoyed. Some stuff at the end with Peter and Ben kind of swinging into action together. So, it's kind of that mixed bag of Bagley that we've been getting over the course of the last few issues. Some really brilliant stuff, and then some kind of rushed, sloppy stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know who Mark Bagley's Janine is, but I'm not sure like any artist has really like landed solidly on who Janine is other than Patrick Gleason, whose Janine I think really comes across on the page as almost like even more styled MJ. Like, she feels very high fashion, very like, which I guess MJ is, but like under Gleason's renderings, I can always pick out Janine. But there is this great image, the ones you mentioned are all really good. And there's one we haven't talked about yet, because we're going to talk about it in a minute, but I really like this opening of like, there's a full page spread or splash of Ben and Janine swinging over the city with his leg kicking up. It's like classic Mark Bagley SpiderMan swinging through the city stuff in his own very limber way. And I really, really appreciated it. Someone in the chat, Alex Galucky, is telling us that this was originally solicited as a Patrick Gleason drawn issue, but was switched to Bagley. And 93 was originally solicited as a $3.99 issue, but now it's a $5.99 issue with Gleason on an art. So maybe they swapped it out to push Gleason to the end of the line so he can end it with a big bang. That sounds about right. So thanks, Alex, for the heads up there. That's something I didn't remember. I did want to speak to the miscoloring that you mentioned. People were catching this, and I saw it when I was reading it. There's like an image where like Peter's has blue knuckles in one of the panels, And there's another panel where it's Peter talking, but he's blonde, and Ben talking, and he's brown haired. And to me, it seems clear that the colorist just like switched it up, but it's awkward because they say each other's names. It's like, I get the colorists, like, because colorists often do stuff before the letterers come in, but like, it's so obvious. It makes me think like, okay, what was the time frame on this comic that the editors, like, really, I read it, I saw it on my first read through, and I shouldn't be catching things on a first read through that an editor should catch on the first read through. So, we've bashed on editorial enough, but it makes me think like, what kind of like fine tooth comb are we going through here? Apparently the digital versions are better. I haven't yet, redeemed my digital copy, but apparently it got fixed eventually. But like, you kind of want to catch these things before they go to print. At least is my feeling.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying, and that's clearly a frustration from a quality control standpoint. To kind of refocus on some stuff that I thought was positive. I mean, again, we've talked at length about Patrick Gleason's Peter. What I think he really captured well here in this issue was the Peter patter, if you will, which is, again, like it kind of was almost reminiscent of like the Stan Lee Ditko era, although with more jokes probably than Ditko would like. But like, just that idea of like, this is clearly a Spider-Man that is not confident in his abilities, but he's going to overcompensate with a patter, with inner monologue, with outer monologue, just going nonstop. I mean, I just felt that balance between insecurity and kind of almost using his humor as a defense mechanism really shines here. I actually, we've joked about it a bunch of times, but like chuckled out loud when he made fun of like Goblin Queen or Queen Goblin. Oh, you rhyme with Green Goblin. I mean, like it's just like that kind of like endless yap running that I think of Peter when he's in these very tense situations. It just all worked for me. Like it was funny but endearing, and you're kind of getting the tension of Spider-Man in just how fast he's motoring, I guess, in terms of his mouth. So
the Queen Goblin Green Goblin line got a legit laugh out of me, like, and also one of those, it was right there the whole time, how come I never noticed that those two rhyme? Like, of course it should have been Queen Goblin, even though Goblin Queen is like what I'm so used to. I think the patter works really well in this issue. I think also like down to kind of the staging of the action scenes where like it's clear that he's kind of biding his time by kind of like, using his jokes, and the kind of like heavy writing on it worked a lot better for me in this issue than it did in 89, where it felt like the jokes were there to be jokes rather than like you said, a defense mechanism. So I totally agree with you. I thought the Peter voice was very, very clear in this issue.
Well, speaking of clear voices, why don't we talk about some of the clear voices that hang out in our Slack community, Dan?
Yeah, sure. Go. Take it away, Mark.
You bet. So hundreds of listeners like you hang out in our community of Spider-Man fans on Slack. The amazing SpiderSlack community is absolutely free to join, and you can jump into active conversations with awesome people about collecting, conventions, movies, new comics, old comics, and more.
Yeah, I hang out in the Slack all the time, and recently we've been talking about Chasm, and some of you are probably thinking like, what is Chasm? Well,
chasing ASM, Dan.
That's the first thing I thought of. Clearly, they're going to do a new Spider-Man book called Chasing Amazing, and Mark will have to renew his battle over the Red Goblin, if we still remember that whole ordeal. This was a hidden message in a recent Patrick Gleason cover, and everybody's been throwing out their theories about it. Honestly, I have no idea what it is. Like, I keep trying to figure out why CH. I know what ASM is, but Chasm is some Ben Reilly thing we're going to learn about. So, like, California, Hollywood, Amazing Spider-Man. That's probably my best guess. But yeah, so if you have some theories about what Chasm is or any other thoughts on Spider-Man, you can join our Spider-Man community. Just follow the link in the description and you can sign up and join our Slack and come hang out with all of us non-toxic Spidey people over there.
Love those non-toxic Spidey people, Dan. So, hey, we got a really cool stand up and cheer moment in Amazing Spider-Man number 89, and I feel like we got another one here in 90, like back-to-back issues, which is really cool. I mean, in this time around, I mean, like, I felt that this was well set up and that Peter was clearly in over his head fighting the Queen Goblin. I mean, she's basically just dragging him through New York City, making tons of property damage in the process, which they comment on. I appreciate that. It's again, like, kicking Peter when he's down and kind of literally, I mean, they literally push him down into the water here and he has to punch his way up. It's just, like, this is the inspiring stuff that makes me love Spider-Man so much. I mean, like, watching Peter, get in over his head here, totally overmatched, but it's his resolve. He kind of jokes about, well, I got the guilt thing down pat, so you can't make me wallow too much in this, Queen Goblin, and when he gets into the Goblin gaze. So I don't know, what did you think of Peter's heroic moment here?
I loved it, but it didn't entirely work for me. So, like, I just want to say before I say why it didn't entirely work for me that I think it's really great. And I think if we didn't get the moment that I thought was so successful for me in 89, I would have been like, this is one of the best moments in a Spider-Man comic. And I still think it is. It's a really beautifully drawn, really well executed moment. But it wasn't thematically, it didn't really work for me. Because, to me, the crisis and confidence about the right to be Spider-Man, which is what's solved by this moment, didn't really seem to be the core conflict for Peter. To me, it was more about his physical capabilities more than any feelings about doubt. He's a guy that's so invested in being Spider-Man that he lies to his girlfriend, former wife, that I'm ready to go. To me, this guy was never really doubting that. Whereas it was the opposite was true for Ben. He was the one that was doubting his place as Spider-Man. So, to me, the crux for Peter was more he was throwing himself into the role of Spider-Man. He was letting that role of Spider-Man, at least, the first issue of Beyond was suggesting this, that Spider-Man was consuming him so that he could avoid thinking about the death of Harry. So, wow, I think this is a really fine beat. It's not one that totally worked for me because I don't feel like at his lowest moment here, the Ben showing up and telling him we can both be Spider-Man, I'm not sure that was what I felt Peter was truly wrestling with. So that level of overcoming it didn't really work for me. It works for me on the page, but as a conclusion to a long simmering storyline for the past 16 issues, it didn't really pay off what I thought it needed to pay off. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a fair analysis, and I might have been caught up more in just the victory moment of it than that deep of level of it. So hearing you describe that, it kind of turns me a little bit on the moment as a whole. But that's that. So yes, you make plenty of sense, Dan. I did want to point out, and I should say this is not an original thought. I forgot who said this on the interwebs, but someone pointed out that would have been cool with the Queen Goblin, since it's Ashley Kafka, kind of reaching back into the memory hole here. And maybe if this was Nick Spencer, they would have, or maybe he would have just written about sins past or something. But when she's giving him the gaze, you would think that maybe some of the stuff that she pulled out of Peter during the Child Within arc back in the JMD era of Spectacular Spider-Man in the 90s, maybe that would have come out. So I don't know, maybe a missed opportunity, or maybe only hardcore fans care about that. Just throwing that out there.
After Nick Spencer's run, I'm very keen on letting things like that go. Right, like that's the kind of thing we would have gotten, which is like cool. Like it references the history, but it's not relevant to the story we're telling right now. So maybe it could have been. But I appreciate that thought. But I'm like, I didn't miss it. I didn't miss
you're right.
it. Yeah.
And I mean, we got one quick reference to Harry's death in the very first issue of Beyond, and we have not touched on it since.
Yeah.
So I think to kind of go there and bring that all up would have just been odd. But it's yes, from a historic standpoint, deep cut, it would have been cool, but you're right. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm being a troublemaker and throwing it out there. That's all.
I mean, I think the sequence works like really well in terms of like Peter is falling down and his body is destroyed, and he goes to the bottom of the East River and he's got the weight of all of that water on him. To see him like use all of his strength to launch himself out of the water to punch the Queen Goblin, I think would have been really powerful. It's more just the framing of it. Like if it was framed as like, the strength of Spider-Man was never about the physical strength, but more about willpower, then I would have been
right.
like, okay, like I know that like Peter always has an iron will, I mean, but it's nice, like the reinforcement of like their brotherhood is nice. And I think it'll serve the end of the book really well. I mean, it's a beautiful sequence, and I did want to point out, it's a really cool. Like I posted this on Twitter, but it does seem to be a direct callback to Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1, Issue 2, where Peter fights the Vulture and goes inside of the water tank in New York and has to launch himself out of it and gather his strength. Like the way he's posed underwater is exactly the same way that like Ditko drew it. And I have to think that like Bagley or Gleason, made that decision to do that. And I thought it was a really cool visual. And, it's neat to see anytime anybody references Ditko, I always like to see like that Ditko's work is so strong, even though it's way simpler. And like here you've got Mark Bagley like drawing the hell out of this and colorists rendering every inch of it, and it looks great. And yet for some reason Ditko's just is more powerful to me. You know what I mean? And it's like really like that's kind of like what makes him such a master. Which is not to take away from this. Again, I really like this moment. But it's moments like this are always good for like kind of like a moment of reflection, because I think this is a really big moment for this book. Maybe what I wanted was the like a too much of a repeat of the get up and cheer moment from the previous issue where Peter, corrals his strength to save the Black Cat, so I can see why maybe they would focus on something else.
Yeah. I mean, I did appreciate, and we talked about this last episode too, Dan, was, Peter refers to it as a breakthrough here. And like to me, this is more of a clear sign. Like I feel like we're going to have a Peter who's not pretending as much going forward. Which, look, like it was admirable and inspiring what he did in the last issue when he saved Black Cat, because he frankly shouldn't have been there. And it's his resolve that got him there. But like, it was kind of, I kind of, maybe this was more of a sigh of relief than a stand up and cheer, that it was like, all right, our boy's back. You know what I mean? Like we're not grading on a curve anymore. Like he's ready to be Spider-Man for real now. So maybe it was more relief, but I did appreciate it. Why don't we end this review talking a little bit about Peter and Ben? I mean, besides obviously the motivation here, but like, we talked about it earlier. These two are just broing out here, even though Ben's brain seems to be going cuckoo right now. I don't know. as someone who was kind of down on this whole concept months ago when they first announced it, like I got to admit, I was kind of lapping this up. All right, the brothers, they're doing it, man. They're doing their secret handshakes, and they're gonna take down the villains. I love it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see them doing this, and obviously it will get complicated. We've still got a few more, 3 more issues to go, but I really dug this, and that final splash page is really wonderful. Both of them in their costumes, posing and saying "bro," right? Because we always like a good bro between Spideys. But whatever. Give me more Bagley splash pages, if you can. So really fun to see them back together, and I can't wait to see how this all concludes. So a lot of fun.
Absolutely. All right. Do we want to just hop right to the grades here?
Yeah, I mean, is there something between an A- and a B+? Like this is on A territory, but for me, like emotionally, the last one hit me a little bit more. So this one, I guess, is like a B+, but it's a really strong B+.
See, you're stealing my line, Dan. All right. I got to admit, before this all started, I was thinking A- on this, but you came up with some good points. The quality control issues with the art need to be taken into account too. So what I was going to say is it's a B+, but it's a very, very, it's the highest B+ you can get without becoming an A-. So
the grades are arbitrary, and so are the new in-between grades we've made up. So
in 89.99999999999.
Okay, great. Well, make sure somebody's recording that somewhere. So that we know how we're doing here. Another really fun issue. I mean, Mark, have we been this positive on Amazing Spider-Man, like this many comics in a row? Like, when was the last time we really felt this strongly about the book?
I think probably Slott Imminent, because there was a good run of issues during those two that I felt really helped close out their run strong. So, but yeah, this is really the first time in several years. So, very excited.
Absolutely. So, well, hey, if you guys find our show entertaining and valuable as much as these comics, please consider supporting us, even if it's not as much as these comics. Because like we said, these are really good comics, and I think we have a really good show, but maybe it's not quite up to par to the comics. But whatever. Why am I even setting up this framing device?
Why are you talking us down, Dan?
I don't know. But you know what? I could still use your help. Recommend Amazing Spider Talk to a friend. That always really helps us. We're still a small podcast with a very loyal following, but we could always use more people in the Amazing Spider Talk fold. So, recommend the show. But if you really love the show and you do think it is as good as these comics, why not become a member on the Patreon?
We can only bring you this content with the support of our Patreon members, and we owe the show's success to every single one of them. And we are constantly making exclusive content for our members.
Yeah, well, so why not take $3.99, the price of a new comic, and put it towards a month subscription to support the show and start receiving our Patreon content. That way you'll hear our Patreon exclusive review podcasts on every new issue of Amazing Spider-Man, just like the one you just listened to, the very week they come out in stores, rather than waiting for them to arrive on Marvel Unlimited and in our public podcasting feed.
And if you contribute $10 a month, you gain access to exclusive artwork from famous Spider-Man artists commissioned exclusively for our members. Plus, every episode, we release a new episode-specific desktop background created for us by artist Nick Cagnetti for our patrons to enjoy.
Yeah, so if you want to join our Patreon, all you have to do is follow the link in the description, click on it. That's how the internet works. It'll take you to our Patreon page. You can see all the things we have to offer. Give it a try. I think you're going to love it when you sign up. So thank you again for your consideration. And a special thank you again to all the members who already are on our Patreon and allow Mark and I to continue making this show.
Alas, though, Dan, it is that time. Time for all good things to come to an end. So we want to say thank you to you, the listeners and viewers, for tuning in to this episode of The Amazing Spider Talk.
Yeah, this episode was edited by Rick Coast with production support from Andy Myers. Our artwork comes handcrafted by artists Ron Friend, Sal Buscema, and Ray Sumser. And our theme songs were produced by Rylan Bojack, Tony Thaxton, and SpiderMan. So Mark, until I forget our motto, what's our motto? Wait, actually, what is our motto and who are you?
Oh, Dan, you silly forgetful person. Our motto is, with great podcasts, there must also come the amazing Spider Talk. Also, why is your face melting into your mask, Dan? I don't understand what's going on here.
Yeah, I'm confused too, stranger, but I appreciate your help.
Good night!
Two men who know the angles, uncover and untangle all the questions and the webs left out to tangle. Be in 1962, last Wednesday's afternoon, they'll bend your ears with reckless self-abandon. The amazing Spider.